Yeah. All right, Levi. Thank you for joining me today. I wanted to just get a quick idea about your day so far. Just tell me a little bit about what's been new with you.
What's new with me, man? I have a YouTube video I'm almost done with. I'm just going through the last few parts of production, so I can't wait to put that out. I'm having fun. I'm reviewing a movie called See You Yesterday on Netflix. And yeah, I'll leave it to the video to tell you about my feelings about it. But I'm doing that. I have a few more projects that I'm working on at the moment. I've had a good weekend so far. I got some Indian food today. Fantastic. There's an Indian buffet place pretty close by. And other than that, yeah, just spruce up my place. Getting stuff ready for my anniversary with my girlfriend. And yeah, that's about it.
Congratulations on the Indian food, not the anniversary. Okay.
Thanks. How about yourself? How you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. I had a lovely time learning more trivia today, setting up some trivia stuff. That was fun.
It was fun.
I do believe today is the start of Chinese New Year. So
right on.
Happy Chinese New Year. It's a week-long thing, so don't burn yourself out tonight. Keep it going. You got a whole week of things.
Oh man,
Chinese New Year.
I guess I'll just put this whiskey away.
Okay. You're not drinking whiskey, I assume, but whatever. Anyway. All right. So I wanted to connect with you to talk about Bright, the film Bright. Yeah.
Timely topic?
Yeah. You had recommended this movie to me. I had never seen it before. So I wanted to just ask you real quickly, why did you recommend this movie to me? Right? What was the reason that you wanted me to see this film?
The reason I wanted you to see this movie was at the time when it came out, it was a hot topic. It was very much a
like
big
the store.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I won't interrupt anymore. Keep going. I'll let you have your time.
My brain literally short-circuited when you said that, and I don't know why. I just froze. I didn't know what to say back.
All right. Sorry. Let's start over. So Levi, why did you want me to watch this movie?
No, at the time when this movie came out, it was a big talking point. A lot of people were talking about its cultural context. Its how it was kind of paving the way for Netflix to start producing real blockbuster films that could compete with movie theaters. It was starring Will Smith. They got a big name actor, Will Smith and Joel Edgerton, both to star in this. It had a very high production value. And some people really loved it, and some people really thought it was mad. Some people really hated it and thought it was offensive. So I thought this would be a good thing for you to kind of, give your 2 cents to, what you thought about it in terms of its quality as just a movie itself, and then also sort of the messaging or the themes behind it.
Okay. Yeah. So I finished watching it just today, actually. And so I'd like to go through it with you then. I had no context for this film. I didn't even know this was a movie until you told me. So
awesome.
All of this is news to me. Let's start with our general opinions on the film.
Well, I'd like to start somewhere else just real quick. I think...
Okay, let you go.
Real briefly, I just like to say, give, for anyone who may be listening, just, a very brief synopsis of the movie and kind of, what it looks like.
Wait. So if you want to... we will definitely do that. But I think... Because, when we're talking about that, I do want to go into very specific points on this movie. So, okay. Well, how about this? You just go. You just do your thing. Go do your thing. Sorry. I'm so sorry.
No,
I keep
don't
interrupting
apologize.
you. Do your thing. I'm sorry.
Just a very general overview of the movie. It's a fantasy world. Some people have said it's more it's kind of like Lord of the Rings meets a buddy cop film, sort of. And it's basically 2 cops. They don't really want to be together. They come across a magic wand, which are it's very rare in this universe. Magic is known, but wands are rare and they're very dangerous. And once it comes into their possession, a bunch of people try to hunt them down and kill them for it. And now they have to escape all these gangs and somehow how to figure out the situation. What do they do with this magic wand? And progress forward. And that's like the very general idea of it. And when I heard about that premise, I was fully into it. I love fantasy. I also like the twist of like it being still a fantasy world being more, or fantasy elements being embedded into modern times and what that world would look like. So I was very pumped for this movie, and I watched it, the first time I watched it with my brother Don, and we both loved it. Then we heard a lot of information about it afterwards, and then we watched it again, and we still really liked it, but we were like, everything everyone said about this movie is 100% true to us, but we still enjoyed the movie. And as time has gone on, I've had various thoughts about it, what I think of it, and how it's aged and everything. But that's just kind of like my general, my quick opinion about it. But how about yourself? I'm really curious what you thought about this movie.
Sure. Okay. So, I had no previous information about this film. I didn't even know that Will Smith was in it. So when I clicked on the button to play the movie and I saw Will Smith's face on the poster on Netflix.com, I was like, "Oh, Will Smith is in this movie. This is weird." I had no idea. I was just completely blown. Anyway, I would say if I had to give like a 2-sentence or like 1-sentence kind of general overview, this is like a fantasy film that tries really hard to have a certain level of realism and a certain level of stakes, a certain level of finality, or a certain level of consequence, right? They're trying to create a movie that has a very real sense of, how do I put this? It's a fantasy film that is trying to push the realism aspect.
Mm-hmm.
In that regard, I think it is only moderately successful.
Okay.
As an action film, the production quality is very high. I was surprised at the production quality of the action. However, I think that the lack of stakes, the lack of consequence, the lack of risk that the main characters face declines as the fantasy elements pick up. So in the beginning of so let me try and summarize that into a more succinct.
No, go for it. Go
thought.
for it. This is cool. Go for it.
Let me try to summarize that in a more succinct thought. This film has two competing aspects.
Mm-hmm.
This film has an aspect of fantasy, and this film has an aspect of realism. And as one is being focused on, the other, I think, suffers. There's not a good marriage between the two aspects of this film. So as the fantasy elements pick up, the realism suffers tremendously. And as the realism starts to pick up, the fantasy starts to suffer tremendously. And I don't know how to reconcile that. I'm not necessarily saying that... I don't think this is a rule, though. This doesn't have to be a rule. There are many... I think there could be a film where fantasy elements that are picking up can also improve the realism, right? You can buy into a movie and buy into the world that it is as the fantasy is becoming more and more rampant, as the magic or as the crazy fantasy elements like monsters or whatever, right? As those elements pick up, you can still buy into the movie. Like, I would say maybe John Wick might be a good example. Although John Wick I don't think has a good... No, I'm not going to use that. Maybe Lord of the Rings, just because Lord of the Rings has a world that is very believable. And the things that happen in that world make sense. There is a realism to it. The people and the characters act and react in a way that is realistic. And I feel that is something that doesn't happen in Bright. As the fantasy turns up, as more magic and more monsters, or not monsters, but as more characters become introduced and as more magic's introduced, the characters don't feel like they're acting very realistically anymore. They start to actually act kind of just as tropes or as cliches. And so that's the problem that I have with the film, is that both sides are competing for the attention of the script, but one is winning, and I think it's the fantasy side that's winning. And so that wasn't very succinct. I said I would make it succinct, but I didn't. I didn't succeed there.
I think you definitely expanded upon that. I think you expressed your thoughts more. So I think you did a good job overall.
Okay. Well, that was my general thought. Let's walk through the movie a little bit. I think that's the best way to go through this.
Yes.
It's going to seem a bit tedious at first, but I think that's just because the beginning of the film is actually quite important from my perspective.
All right.
So
and
let's go ahead and...
Yeah, go ahead. Right before we do that, I will actually
Yeah.
add to this. I will say one thing I failed to mention
Yeah.
on my part was that as much as I did enjoy this movie, from just like an action movie, fantasy element stuff, because I'll eat that stuff up all day. I can just sit there and just kind of enjoy what's being thrown at me. I will say, though, from a storytelling perspective and from a world-building perspective, like you very much said, I don't think what they were trying to do... I saw the attempts, but it wasn't like fully realized. And I do think there is a good foundation, and there's a lot of good ideas here because which I'll get into more of that other thing later. But there's a good foundation here that I think you could make something very special if you're going to attempt a sequel or maybe do something similar to this idea here. But we'll get into that more as we go along.
Yeah, I agree. I think there are some interesting ideas here, but there's, I think, a lack of execution from the film overall. So let's start with the film. We have a cold open on our heroes. The hero is Daryl Ward. I didn't even know his first name was Daryl until like the very end of the film. But anyway, his name is Daryl Ward. Everyone just calls him Ward. So that's Will Smith.
Well, I would say the movie starts even before that. Or no, it does. It starts him and his partner out on the patrol.
Nick Jacoby.
Right? Yeah,
Nick Jacoby. I guess technically the film starts with a credit sequence where there's
all the graffiti.
Camera angles of graffiti in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
But the film opens on a cold open and...
Oh wait, no, we're both wrong. It doesn't open that way. We're both wrong. It opens on a quote.
Oh, does it? I don't remember the quote.
Yeah, that's very important because it opens on a quote. It basically gives you the definition of what a bright is, and a bright is.
Oh, that's right. I do remember that now.
And a bright is essentially a person who can use a magic wand, and it's just talking about how brights, how powerful they are, and kind of like how it's a little bit like how they're kind of rare. Essentially.
Oh yeah.
And then it goes.
I do remember that.
And then it goes into freed about the Dark Lord, orcs rising up, people hating orcs, people hating other races, and then it cuts to Will Smith.
Yeah. So we got Will Smith, Daryl Ward, and we got Nick Jacoby, right?
Great
name. And so, yeah, they were really creative with these names. You can tell. You can tell that Jacoby is just dripping with orc tongue. Oh, yeah, Jacoby.
I can't wait till we get some of the later orc names because I'll give you my favorite orc name later. But
Mikey.
Oh, he knows it. Mikey the orc.
When that happened, I was just like, I'm not in this at all. I checked out after that.
We'll get to it. We'll get to Mikey later. I want to get to Mikey later.
So we open on Jacoby and we open on Ward. What's important is that Jacoby is doing something else and Ward is getting shot at. He gets shot by an orc that is coming out of a convenience store.
Yeah, robbed.
I think he
robbed it and then ran off. Yeah, shot Ward and ran off.
I don't even think he robbed it. I think he was. The scene was just that he put up his hood in the convenience store and then walked out and shot Ward. That was all that happened. It didn't have any implication that he was robbing it. He might have even owned the store. Who knows?
Maybe he did. Maybe he did. He just doesn't like humans, and that's probably very true. That might actually very happen that way.
Yeah, and so then after the shot, we have the scene of the gun barrel being pointed at Ward. And then after that, it's immediately cuts to Ward in his bed. And he's at home. And I guess he's recovered. He's recovered from the gun wound. It doesn't really show him getting shot or anything, but it's kind of an abrupt cut to later on in the future. We see that Will Smith, is hanging out at home with his wife or girlfriend or something. Well, not really clear.
I think it's his wife, because he's a kid. I assume that it's his wife, and it's a mixed race relationship.
Yeah, I thought it was, but I wasn't sure. It was never really explicitly stated. And so I think this is the first time that we're getting to see an important part of the film. We're starting to see a bit about Ward's motivations. So here's what happens in the scene. He's talking to his wife, and his wife is commenting on how she does not want Ward to be partnered with Jacoby because Jacoby is an orc. She says, "I don't want you in the car with him," or something of that along that line.
Yeah.
And Ward says, "I don't want him in my car either." And why doesn't he want him in the car? I don't want him in the car either. I have 5 years to go until my pension. I don't want to mess it up. He says fuck it up, but whatever. Anyway, I don't want to fuck it up. He's a tough guy. He swears. So he doesn't want to fuck up his pension. He says that's his worst nightmare. My worst nightmare is screwing up the money. So money is very important to him from this scene. And the wife says actually something that's a line that was pretty good. She says, "My worst nightmare is seeing you come in during my shift," because she's a nurse at the ER, I assume. And so she doesn't want to see her boyfriend or her husband come in while she's at work.
She's a street nurse.
Yeah, absolutely.
All too common.
But either
street
way.
Nurse.
So I actually thought that was a really good line, and I thought that was solid. And so now we have the motivation of Ward. Why is he putting up with all this? It's because of money.
Money for the family.
Money for the family, yes. And then we have a quick scene of him talking to his daughter, and the daughter is like, "Mom says that you're in trouble because Nick got you in trouble." And then Will Smith kind of gives Ward gives a quick speech, kind of a lecture to his daughter about how all the races are equal. He says, quote unquote, "We're all just trying to get along," right?
He says they're all different, but
but we're all trying to get along.
Yeah.
And that's what he says. And so that kind of makes it sound like he's trying to teach his daughter, like, hey, respect the other races. We're all people. Now, Jacoby drives up to the house, right? Actually, no, one more thing I want to point out before that happens. There's a fairy outside the house. And it's pestering the house. And by pestering, it's kind of like poking at a bird feeder or something. It's trying to like get food out of a bird feeder. And it's very clear to the family that this is a pest and they don't want it around. And so the wife requests that Ward kill the fairy. Now, this is interesting because Ward was kind of talking about how all the races are equal and stuff like that, and how we're all just trying to get along. But when he goes outside to deal with this fairy, he takes a broomstick and then he swats the fairy out of the sky with the broomstick. It's twitching in pain on the ground, and then he lands a death blow with the broomstick, full swing from over his head, full overhand swing onto this fairy. And it dies, and you see a splattering of like purple blood all over the ground, and you see the onlookers going like, "Oh man, that was hardcore," stuff like that.
And before he hits it, he even says, "Fairy lives don't matter today."
Exactly. He says, "Fairy lives don't matter." Now, I'm just having a hard time reconciling these two actions you could say he's a bit of a hypocrite here, because clearly he's trying to educate his daughter on how all lives of all races are equal and we're all just trying to get along. And here he is murdering a fairy. Now, I don't know, but anyway, go ahead. I think this is part of the theme. The theme of this film, this is kind of like one of the main themes, is race. And does race influence, or does race predetermine your status in society, right?
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Yeah, and like what's interesting about this is, yes, race is a huge part of this movie as we further discuss this as we go throughout it. But one thing but this is a big failure of the movie. Like, it sets up an interesting world where there was a war. There were 9 races involved in this war, and the 9 races banded together and defeated this Dark Lord, and now they all live together in relative harmony. I use that loosely, but relative harmony. But it's not really fully defined what those races are. And when you go through the world, yes, there's humans, there's orcs, there's elves, and then there's a sign that shows that there's like lizard people of sorts. You see a centaur at one point, and that's 5. And outside of that,
you got fairy.
Yeah, and you have fairy. But see, the thing is, fairy, like, is that one of the 9 races? Because I think this is where it, like, to go back to your example, like John Wick. John Wick is a very good there's a very good thing where it introduces the world to you and explains the rules to you very clearly, very simply, very fast, without having to tell you much. And this world does it very clunkily. It doesn't give you enough information at times, or certain things are too ambiguous. Like, you would think that, okay, a fairy then would be just another race of another type of person that's there, but it's treated more as a pest, not like like if like a kid ran up on like my lawn, I'm like, hey, get off my lawn, or I swat at the kid with the broom. Like, maybe I hit the kid with the broom because I'm just trying to scare him away. No, he upright kills this thing like it's like a fly or a mosquito or a spider or something. So there's a lot of mixed messages and inconsistency and confusion just in that one opening scene alone. And this is what's supposed to set the tone for the movie and tell us like how the world functions a bit more. So it's just kind of weird in that regard. It's like a very big misstep to start out the movie.
And I think this is the reason why I'm kind of going through this scene so meticulously, is because this is the very first time that we're introduced to this world. We don't know. I didn't know any information about this world other than that the quote in the beginning about the Brights. Brights are people who can use wands. Okay, I got it. And then we understand that orcs like to graffiti stuff around LA.
Orcs used to be bad. They used to be like in like a bunch of fantasy settings. Orcs are typically the bad guys.
It's not even clear in this film that, like, in the very beginning, it's not even clear that orcs were bad. It just says that orcs praise the Dark Lord. That's all it keeps saying. So
we don't know much about the Dark Lord either. We don't really know.
We never really do.
we never really it's just the biggest line you hear about it is like someone in a prejudiced way says, "Once with the Dark Lord, always with the Dark Lord," and just kind of talk about how orcs used to fight for the Dark Lord, but you never learn who he is, what his name is, what he really did, what happened during the war. You get some hints at it and some small things around it, like adjacent to it, but yeah, it's very ambiguous. It's very ambiguous, we'll get more into later why I think that is, but yeah, it is ambiguous to start.
Yeah, so there's a lot of missing information there, but let's get back to the whole point of him killing this fairy. I figured that the fairies were one of the races. And I thought, like, he just committed murder. Is this going to become, like, a big plot point? Is he going to be taken to, like, fairy court? And then he's going to have to, like, he's going to be chased by fairy federal police officers? And he's going to have to, like, start fighting against the fairies and stuff like that? No, not even talking.
Never comes up. Like, you only see fairies one other time. It's the very end. We just see one kind of, like, fly by.
So it was just a wasted plot point. It's not even a plot point. It's just extra work for the CGI artists.
Yeah, it's like, hey, we need a fantasy thing here. What fantasy things you got? I can make a fairy. Yeah, do that.
Go. Okay.
And then we'll kill it.
So that's that.
Yeah.
Another thing I want to talk about is when Ward meets Jacoby, and we have kind of the first interaction with Ward and Jacoby. So Jacoby drives up to visit Ward because it's Ward's first day back into the police station, into the police force since his injury, since he got shot at. And so Jacoby drives up in the police car, and Ward is really angry. He's really angry, and we're not 100% sure why. I went through and reread the script for that scene. He doesn't really mention anything. He just says, don't show up in that car with that outfit. He's wearing his police uniform. So don't show up with your police uniform in the police car at my house ever again. That's what he says. And then he even tells Jacoby, like, shut up, when Jacoby is trying to, like, make a counterpoint. And his daughter is the one who's like, hey, don't say shut up to Jacoby. He's a person too. Orcs are people too. And I'm like, wow, this kid doesn't need a lecture. He was the one that was like trying to lecture the daughter, but the daughter is the one who's like clearly got it the right way around.
I love that moment so much because right after that, Jacoby says to Ward, he says to him, "You got a very enlightened daughter there, Ward."
Yeah. Got to admit.
Which actually, I have to say, to this movie's credit, it does have a good bit of humor in it, small jokes here and there. Like you get some good small chuckles here and there, and I do think Will Smith and Jacoby's chemistry, for me personally, it works well through the whole movie. I think their dynamic works well. The material they're using doesn't always work well for them, but I think their chemistry does work.
Well, I can buy that they have a level of tension. I understand that. I can buy that for sure. But I don't know if I buy that Ward hates him, because it just doesn't seem... Well, here's the problem. We're not sure what happens because we're never shown the full events of the shooting until much, much later in the film. I think like all the way in the second half of the film we're shown what happens.
So yeah, it's like around, like just like right about the midpoint or just after the midpoint, something like that.
Yeah. And that's actually a big point in the film. But the problem with that is us as viewers, or myself as a viewer, I have no idea what happened, and I have no idea why Ward is upset with Jacoby, other than the fact that he's an orc. That's the only information that I really have. He's an orc. And so this is, and it's built upon a little bit piecemeal. It's very piecemeal in how they build upon that. But the fact that I don't know the events, and it's fine to say, it's fine that how do I want to say this? It's fine that they don't show it. I don't want them to show it per se, because I understand that by showing it, they're actually revealing a plot point.
Yeah.
But they need to at least talk about it. Here's the thing. We see him get shot. The next thing that we see is them talking about fairies, killing a fairy, and them saying like, "I don't want you to get shot again." But we're never really able to talk about why was he shot at. They don't say it. They don't explicitly talk about why was he shot at. You don't know that until later. And the reason he was shot at is because Jacoby is an orc that somehow betrayed orc unwritten rules. There's some kind of unwritten rule about orcs that they can't be police officers or something.
Like,
is that right?
It's like that's just another thing. It's another fault of like the world building here, because you don't really. Everything's very ambiguous. The most you know is that orcs have some sort of unwritten code amongst them it's the clan first. It's the clans first, orcs first. And by joining the police force, it's going against that, because now you're putting the laws, and specifically human societies and humans' laws specifically, above orcs. And he's like, it's not just that, like, there's like, he gets made fun of for a lot of things, like the way he dresses, his fangs are like de-sharpened, like in a sense, so people make fun of him for that. And now he's taking orders from the police, and this really harkens to, like, it's supposed to parallel, like, because growing up in Los Angeles as I did, like a lot of like kids who, like, a lot of like Mexican gangsters or African American gangsters, like, to join the police, to join the man, to start dressing differently was seen as, oh, you've betrayed us, you're like just kind of disregarding your people, your culture, your heritage, your home, sort of thing. And it's supposed to reflect that. And I don't think it always strongly does that. I think it has a chance to, like, it almost gets there in some ways. But I think they're trying to reflect that sort of aspect of it.
Okay, I see. So the problem is, this is never explicitly stated. I have no idea why the orcs really hate him. It's always hinted at. There's a lot of hints about why the orcs hate him. But it's kind of like if I said, okay, the problem here is that how can the audience be expected to know this? This is a fantasy world where there was a Dark Lord thousands of years ago There are multiple races interacting with one another. There's so many new factors that I have to think of. I can't be expected to know what orcs like and what they don't like, and what they care about and what they don't care about. I have no idea, because this is a completely different race. This is a completely different culture. And so if it's not explicitly stated...
right there, actually, I think that is the reason this movie is one of the biggest failures of the movie, because what you said is this is a completely different culture. But the problem is the movie... it wants to treat it as a different culture, but it doesn't actually execute that. As we see, it equivocates orcs more or less. Did it again. It equates shampoo brand. It equates orcs to more akin to black gangs, to Hispanic gangs in Los Angeles, like circa 1990. It very much tries to reflect that. They don't give orcs too much of their own culture. They say things, orcs have these things in their culture, but they more just reflect like one-to-one comparisons of things we've seen in real life, things we've heard about or seen on TV. And in that way it leads to the confusion that you're having right now, because now you don't fully understand what this culture is, what it does. Because it's just giving you, this is what gangs do in our time. This is like some people have acted, or how we've portrayed gangs to act in our society. And I think that makes it very difficult for someone who, if you're just kind of looking at this passively, it's acceptable. But if you're really considering the deeper meaning of it, I think that's where it gets hard. That's why you end up with a situation like we have right now.
Yeah. And so I guess that is another fault of the film, is that I actually was going to bring up later on. That I don't think you need orcs in this movie. I don't think you need elves or orcs or any... it doesn't need to be a fantasy film. This could just be a normal buddy cop movie, action film, and then you just replace the orcs with whatever gang you want. It doesn't even have to be a race. It can just be the Bloods or the Crips or the King, whatever. It doesn't matter. And then you just replace the elves with any, you could call them the Russians or the Chinese, any powerful people. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, any sort of group that has integrated the community and has done well for themselves financially, most likely through mobbish means, or maybe just through thrift or whatever it is.
Whatever, it doesn't matter. Because there's nothing about this movie, about the orc. They don't tell me anything about the orcs. They don't tell me anything about the elves. I don't get.
Yeah, and that's a big fault. I understand your frustration, because when I saw this movie, I fell in love with. Admittedly, I fell in love with the potential of what was there. I'm like, oh, this is cool. Look at all this fantasy shit. But the more you think about it, or when you don't even think about that much, it's just very surface level stuff. And the big sell is it's fantasy integrated into the real world. Cool. Okay, what do you got for me? There's orcs. Okay, tell me about the orcs. Oh, they're essentially just like any other gang you've seen before. Oh, yeah, they wear do-rags. They wear jerseys. They listen to hip-hop music, or some listen to more death metal music or things like that. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. I'm not saying you can't do that, because different cultural gangs, like Mexicans and blacks, both borrow from each other in terms of gang culture, style, somewhat of music. So there is some appropriation there between both groups, but they both still have their own cultural aspects and flavor and differences that make what they are very unique. And orcs, other than just their physical appearance, do not have that. Elves, same thing. They don't have that. They're just rich people. Orcs are just poor people. Poor blacks or poor Hispanics, depending on how you want to look at it. And the movie is lazy and doesn't go beyond that.
Yeah. So that's the thing, that all of this just kind of compounds the problem that I just have no idea why everyone is so upset at Jacoby. For most of the film, I'm just so perplexed as to what is going on. Why does everyone hate him? I understand that everyone hates him. It's very clear that internal affairs of the police station wants him out. They want to get rid of him. And so what they're trying to do is they're trying to have Ward. All right, so next scene. All right, let's go to the
let's
next
just move along. Let's do that.
So
that was just the beginning, the very beginning.
This is just the very beginning. But as I mentioned before, I feel like the beginning part of the movie is actually the most important to discuss.
Yeah.
So, next scene is actually Will Smith drops off his daughter, and Will Smith dropping off his daughter. Ward. Ward dropping off his daughter. The daughter is upset at Ward at her father, and he asks like, "What's going on? Why are you so angry?" And she says, "Why do you have to be a policeman? Everyone hates policemen." And it's obvious that they have a strained relationship. And I thought, okay, here we go. Here's a family relationship. He has one with his wife or girlfriend where she's worried about his safety. And then he has one with his daughter where the daughter is kind of maybe questioning his racial tendencies or how he treats other races, and also questioning like his choice of profession. Why did you decide to become a policeman? What's the point? Why are you doing this? Everyone hates you anyway, right? And so I thought, oh, okay, here's something interesting. The motivations of the character of Ward, he wants to be financially secure. The motivations of his family, they want his safety. They want to find out why does he do what he does. And I thought that throughout this movie, this is what it would build upon. It would build upon why does he choose to be a policeman? What are the reasons that he chooses to be a policeman? Is it really just for money, or is it actually for something greater, right? And then it doesn't build on that at all. No. I keep waiting throughout the whole.
You get a small, not to jump around too much, but you do get a little bit of it, like way later in the movie when they're Jacoby and I always call him Will Smith. Jacoby and Ward, they are held up in a bathroom, in a gas station bathroom way later. That big emotional scene, that exchange there, Ward does say that he used to be like Jacoby, someone who who joined the force, who just wants to help, who wants to be a good person, a good police officer, and wants to do well, but he doesn't. But he's not that person anymore, and that's like the big reveal you get to answer the thing that you were talking about earlier. Like that's why he originally did that job, but just the realities of being a police officer in Los Angeles in the midst of like all this, inside political bullshit and the racial stuff, it just really, it changed him, it hardened him, and it made him, it opened his eyes and realized that the world is much crueler than he imagined it to be. However, you only get that small thing. You don't really get that completely through. I suppose you can infer it. You can see the world is chaotic around them, but that's all you really get for that emotional beat. That's about it.
So I do want to talk about that bathroom scene because I think that's another important scene. But for the most part, just to quickly comment on it before we move on, I do feel like that line from Will Smith was more lip service than it was really character building, because it's one thing to say it, but it's another thing to actually show it through action and through decision making. And then he doesn't really make any. Anyway, we'll talk about it later. But
yeah, we'll get to it. But yeah, I understand what you're saying. Keep going though.
So let's go ahead and talk about the scene at the police station. I think there are two important things to talk about, or maybe two and a half. So the first one I want to talk about is Ward is trying to get out of the partnership. He tells Jacoby, while Jacoby is out doing something else, Ward goes up to the sergeant and he says, "Sarge, I want you to take my name off of the list. I want you to put Jacoby on a different squad or with a different partner. I don't want to ride with him anymore. I don't want him to be my partner anymore." And the sergeant says no. And then Ward says, "What do you mean no? You can just scratch it out on the little pad." And at first the sergeant is saying, "Oh, these decisions are made like 90 miles above me. This is not even my choice to make." And then it comes to truth what the real reason is. It turns out that no one else wants to ride with Ward. There is no one else that wants to be Ward's partner. And so Jacoby is the only person that is available to be Ward's partner. And that's the reason why they're paired together. And I thought that was an important point because it shows how Ward is clearly a very flawed character. We already knew Ward was somewhat flawed, but now we have like concrete evidence.
His murderous tendencies kind of gave that away.
Yeah. But now we have like concrete evidence that this is a flawed character. There is evidence saying no one likes him. And the problem with that is, I mean, there's a lot of problems with the film. This one problem I have with this aspect is I don't really understand why no one likes him. I get that no one likes him. I think this is interesting. I thought, like, okay, here we go. We'll actually get to see, like, what did he do to make people dislike him? And as far as I can tell, the reason why people don't like him is because he's sassy. That's about it.
That's not what I thought you were going to say, because I had a different reason. I can understand that. I'm like, yeah, I can see someone seeing that. That's all he really does. He says like snarky comics and shit. I would say the only reason that I at least took away from it, aside from the fact that he is a sassy individual, is that it seems like the only reason people are ever mad at him is because he is in this situation he doesn't want to be in. Like, he rides with an orc. It seems like he catches a lot of flack for that, and people hate him for that he doesn't complain about it more. I think that's kind of what it feels like. It was like, hey man, you ride with an orc, don't you know how shitty that is? And he even says, yeah, I don't want this. And they're like, well, it kind of feels like they're saying, like, yeah, well, you're a piece of shit because you're in this situation. And that's to, at least to me when I watch it, like, it feels like that's the only reason people hate Ward, because like you said, they don't ever give you any other reason that people don't like him. They just state that. It's an interesting point. I think it's also an interesting juxtaposition between him and Kobe, because Kobe is hated because he's considered like an ancestor monster of a race of people that tried to kill off humanity a long time ago. And Ward is a human being that is an undesirable as well, but through different reasons. So they're both undesirables, and that is a connection point that they can both have, which I think is cool, but once again, it doesn't not expanded upon. And which it could have been expanded upon in that bathroom scene, which we'll get to later. But like it's a point that's brought up that I think is interesting but not fully explored.
Yeah, exactly. So I like the idea of these two people who are undesirable come together and they help each other grow, right? But that's yeah, I agree. But I think one thing to note is, I think that's, it's a trope that's been done many times before. We've seen we've seen that arc many times. But one thing to think about is the reason why he was put with Jacoby in the first place. The reason that he is put with an orc in the first place was because no one wanted to ride with him. So even before the orc ever showed up, everyone hated him. And there's no indication as to why everyone hates him, except that he likes to crack jokes. They're not even that funny. Half the time, they're just meh. They're just like the stand-up comedian who's trying hard to not get heckled. It's just whatever. Okay, he makes jokes about your. If I need advice on my ninth divorce, I'll ask you for help. Haha, got him good.
Also, a small thing to bring up. Ward is supposed to be, at least the way he's portrayed, as like this very big loner guy. But the first thing they show you is that he has a family and he has a daughter. Now I'm not saying like that does give him another layer. Like you could start him out saying that he's like this hard-nosed loner person, doesn't have any friends. But he does have a family, which gives him another dimension. But I do think to start him out with the family aspect, but then show him to be a sort of try-hard loner asshole, kind of like messes with those two different characteristics a little bit. Like, I think if you would have started him the loner asshole, and then maybe Jacoby learns a little bit later that he actually has a wife or a girlfriend, and he actually has a daughter and stuff, that could have showed like, Jacoby also misjudges people, just like Ward just misjudges him. So I think that's a small part that kind of like it doesn't do any favors for Ward's character to start out that way. But that's just kind of a general thought I have.
I don't even think he's trying to be a loner. It doesn't seem like he's actively pushing anyone away. He seems quite friendly until people start to get in his face.
No, I agree with that. I completely agree. I mean, like, what they're trying to make him a loner, like through speaking it, like. As I said, we'll get to the bathroom scene later, but like it's stated, like that stuff is stated, but it's not executed very well. And starting him out like showing him like, I have a wife, I have a daughter, I love them very much. It doesn't send the loner asshole message very well. And then obviously through the rest of the movie, he doesn't really do that either.
Yeah, all right. And so another thing I want to point out is that up to this point, there has been no real mention of magic. But I think now magic will start to come into play more. So
Yes.
what happens is there's two more things that happen kind of in this time frame. One is that the internal affairs cops show up and they press Ward to snitch on Jacoby. They ask Ward to plant a bug so that way Ward can get Jacoby to admit that he let the shooter go. And this is the first time that we're really talking about the shooter since in the whole film. Since we saw the shooter, this is the first time that we get to actually hear someone talking about the shooter again. And this is like already like 20, maybe not 20, like 15 minutes into the movie or something. And this is like the first time that we're hearing it again.
They're just building tension, Darren.
Right, I was so tense. But anyway, it's implied that Jacoby let the shooter go because the shooter was an orc. And so we're told that Jacoby went in pursuit of the shooter after Ward was shot. Ward is shot, he's critically injured. Jacoby pursues the shooter. And then what happens is Jacoby says that he loses sight of the shooter or something like that. The shooter gets away, right? And then that the shooter jumps up onto a fire escape and scales the building and flees across the rooftops. And so what they say then is, we went over to the crime scene. That's just what the internal affairs people are saying. They're saying, we went to the crime scene. We examined that fire escape. That fire escape ladder was 12 feet off the ground. No orc has a vertical of 12 feet. Have you ever seen an orc with a vertical of 12 feet? You ever see an orc play basketball? No way, man. They're fat and they're ugly and they're slow and stuff like that. And then they say, that's why all the orcs are linemen in the NFL. It's not racist. It's just physics. And I remember because of that line. It's not racist. It's physics. And that was kind of like that was, I guess, another theme moment where they're talking about race determines your place in society, it determines your status, and it determines what you do, right? You're an orc, so you're slow, and you're strong, so you're a lineman. And if you're, I guess, an elf or a fairy or something, you're good at jumping or flying, so you'd be good at basketball, right? So that's what happens. So we touch on the theme of race again in that scene. And then Ward says, I'm not going to sell him out. And I thought, okay, this is interesting. We're going to get to see more about Ward's motivation and get to learn more about, like, what is his real relationship with Jacoby? Does he actually care about Jacoby? And he says, I'm not selling him out. Why? Because that would ruin my street cred as a street cop. I ain't no snitch. I'm like, oh, okay, that's all. That's all it was. He just doesn't want to ruin his cred as a street cop. And
I think you could use that point, though, as something interesting, like, he doesn't want to admit that he cares about Jacoby, and so he tries to cover it up with something like that. They don't go that route, but I'm just saying that could have been something interesting they could have done there, where he, like, maybe hesitates and says, well, I just don't want to ruin my street cred. You know, he could have played a little bit like there was another thought there, but he chose to go with a lie instead.
Right.
But I think he legitimately was like, yeah, I just don't want to lose my street cred. That's it.
Yeah, that's how it's acted out, and that's how it's portrayed. That's how it's directed. As literally all he cares about is his street cred. I understand that there's an aspect where he could have been lying and saying, oh, I can't tell them that I actually care about an orc, right? Because everyone hates this orc, and if I say that I like him, I'm gonna get hated too. He already is hated, so there's no reason for him not to say it.
Hated.
How can he be any less hated? They literally try to kill him. There's nothing else left. Just say, I'm not gonna sell out my friend, or something.
They're not friends. They're not friends. That's very clear.
Well, see, when they say that at the end, that's that's kind of like what you're trying to go for. He's just trying to be a hard ass. He doesn't want to admit that he really cares about his friend. He's like, "Are we friends?" And it's like, "No, we're not friends." No, they're definitely friends, right? It's clear.
I don't
that they're
know.
friends
The movie said they weren't friends several times. I don't know.
Well, of course, if the movie says so, that's what it is. Duh.
Very emphatically.
But this scene, it's not like that. It's just he doesn't want to lose his street cred as a cop. That's it. It's like, okay, fine.
Fine, be that way.
Fine. Okay. If that's your motivation, that's fine. But it's just not exciting. It's not compelling, right?
Yeah.
And so then the next thing I want to talk about in that kind of sequence is the crazy guy. And this is where we actually start talking about magic.
Before we get to that, just real quick, small thing was they sort of dangle in front of him his family stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So they to the movie's credit, they do stick with that theme of like, hey, like, what would your family think, you know? Or like what would happen to your family, you know, if you didn't just cooperate and try to do this, or what good things could come of it for your family. You know, they take all these different angles. So the movie does stay consistent with that. Even later on, it does that too. So to movie's credit, just so we're not just only just bashing on it, to movie's credit, it does do that. But yes,
that's true.
True. The homeless, dirty man that I thought should have been in someone else. But go through your synopsis of that.
Yeah. So they purely by coincidence, Jacoby and Ward are on patrol and they happen across a crazy guy in the street with a sword. Shirtless, very dirty, ragged, looks homeless. And he's just swinging the sword around, and there's a whole crowd of people gathered around a big circle watching this crazy guy. And they introduce him.
I thought he was a giant at first. I thought he was going to be like, oh, this guy's a big, tall dude. I'm like, no, he's just a slightly taller man.
I can see why you might have thought that in some of the angles.
The first shot, I was like, oh, it's a giant. Oh, wait, it's just a dirty guy.
It's just a dirty guy. No, it's just a normal man.
My mistake.
That would have actually been kind of cool to see a giant.
It would have been. It would have been. But yeah.
Yeah. And then we're actually also introduced to another character, Rodriguez, who is, I guess, Ward's only friend. Maybe. Yeah. And that's about it. That's all that they are. They're friends. And okay, but anyway, unless you have something you really want to say about Rodriguez.
No, it's just like his Alamo line.
Yeah, exactly. And so that the Alamo line was kind of funny. I get it.
But a lot of people were mad about that, though. A lot of people were mad about that line.
I agree. I wasn't very... So, while I didn't laugh, I did think that it gave the character a unique perspective. It just made me remember him, right?
Yeah.
That's all. So, I think that it makes sense that he says it. Whether or not it was politically correct, I don't have any background on that, so I don't care.
I don't think it was the because like from someone who is Mexican, I'm not from Texas though. Like I have family from Texas, but I'm not from Texas, and I would imagine some people in Texas who are racially insensitive might bring it up a little bit, maybe, you know. But I don't know to what extent Texans bring it up with Mexican people there. I've never been. No one's ever looked at me and said, "Oh, you remember the Alamo?" And I've never been like. Yeah, like that conversation has never taken place.
Maybe you're just not surrounded by Alamo truthers.
Yes, that well-known group, the Alamo Truthers.
You can join their Facebook site, their Facebook group.
I kind of like that, the Alamo Truthers. I think the implications that people had more problem with was the Alamo exists. Like the events of the Alamo have taken place in this world, but a world that is lived with orcs, with elves, with all these other creatures, you would think that would have more effect on the world and the world's events. And so because you don't know much about the aftermath of the war, or what takes place between the war and modern times, you don't really see how it really affects history in any regard. And this is admittedly a nitpick, but yeah, like it just seems as though world events, at least by this token, world events seem to roll out just as is. Like, the Louisiana Purchase happened the same way. All 50 states are still the same shape and size.
The French Revolution.
The French Revolution.
World War II.
Like, that's what people, I think when people say the world building is very shallow, is you don't get that. You just basically have fantasy creatures dropped in this world. Yes, there's a past. It didn't affect anything in between that and now, and here we are now. So that's what makes that line very interesting. I don't put that much stock in it because I'm just like, okay, yes, moving on from there. That's about it. But I understand why people got a little upset about it.
Oh, I understand the perspective now that you're saying. I thought it was more of a political statement, but
Yeah.
I understand now.
Yeah.
To be honest, there was such little commitment on the film's part to building a world that, like, I didn't even care. There was so little that was actually put into it. The only other line I can think of where this war comes up is when, at least up to this point in the movie, is when the asshole cop meets Ward. There's an asshole cop, and he says, "My ancestors 2,000 years ago killed the orcs, and my Russian ancestors," or something like that. He says, like, how my ancestors were killing orcs 2,000 years ago. How dare you ride with one? Something like that. And that's about it. And it's just lip service. There's nothing about that actually impacts what anyone does.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. Like, that's what I said. Like, there's so many things that are said that, like, catch my fantasy loving ear. I'm like, okay, that's cool. Talk about that. Oh, the story just, okay, moving on. And then that's
just moving on.
And I'm just like, you had a chance. But anyways, but that's literally how most of the movie feels.
Yeah, it's all lip service. They're suggesting to you that there's something interesting happening in the background, but what that is and how that actually impacts people is not expanded upon at all. And then so now we're at the crazy guy.
Yeah.
And the crazy guy, initially he does seem kind of crazy. He's talking in tongues. He can speak Orcish.
You can.
He's telling Jacoby, as they've cuffed him and he's in the back of their car, he's telling Jacoby, like, about a prophecy. He doesn't explicitly say anything about the prophecy. All he says is that, I wrote it down.
Your partner is blessed. Like, he's like kind of talking about he's talking about Ward.
Yeah. Let me look at it real quickly. Okay, so here it is.
Yeah.
Remember the old ways. Remember your traditions. The prophecy has chosen you. The man with you is blessed. That's basically it. That's all he says. Remember the traditions. Remember the old ways. The prophecy has chosen you. The man you are with is blessed.
Now, if I may about this prophecy,
go ahead.
I think the prophecy itself, is some good cryptic stuff that kind of gets it's supposed to get the viewer interested. Like, oh, wait, what's this about? But the prophecy is so vague, and no one ever really talks about it much after that. Like, you don't understand, like, why Will Smith and Jacoby have been the ones that have been was Wade? Ward.
Yeah,
sorry,
Ward.
You said Wade, and I got real confused. Like, wait, who's Wade? Yes, Ward.
Ward, my bad.
Will Wade Ward, the Tri-W guy. Tri-Dub.
Represent
Tri-Dub. I like that. But anyways, so Tri-Dub is the chosen one. But you don't.
We've done more world building for Will Smith than
than
the movie
just
did for
this moment.
than the movie did for the orcs.
That's the thing, is like, we don't know why Tri-Dub is chosen, or there's this prophecy about it, or how even the not giant guy, we don't really know how this crazy guy, like, makes this prophecy. All you learn is that he has this prophecy. He says it in Orcish. Jacoby's kind of afraid of it, and there's something called the Shield of Light. Another mysterious thing that he mentions, like the Shield of Light, an extremist group that's basically...
No, that's the Inferni. The Inferni is the extremist group.
Well, no, there's the Inferni who's there, it's basically like the Inferni is there, like, we're bringing back the Dark Lord. The Shield of Light is, like, the group that's like, we're here to stop the Dark Lord if he returns.
Right, but I wouldn't call them extremists. I think the Inferni are the extreme... Whatever. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Will Smith just kind of... Wade.
Ward.
Damn it. Damn it. Ward calls both of them extremists because they all carry guns and shit. But he's part of the Shield of Light, and he just mentions this prophecy. But you just don't learn like what led him to this information. Like why is it, or like why is it? You get some payoff of it later, but you don't ever really learn why.
Right. I think the issue here is that the prophecy in full is never stated. You never actually hear the prophecy. You only hear people talk about the prophecy.
That's true.
It's a recurring, like, what is the prophecy? I don't know. The prophecy is that there's something about an orc that has been unblooded, or basically uninitialized, right? It's just like an uninitialized orc will do something great. And that's all I know. That is it.
And that Ward is blessed.
Okay, and that Ward is blessed. We don't know if that's actually part of the prophecy. He says it as two different statements. I don't understand if they're linked or not. The prophecy has chosen you. The man that is with you is blessed. Are these things connected?
Oh yeah,
I don't know.
That's a good point. I never thought of that. It is said as two different. At least you can interpret it as two different things. Like it could be like, this man is blessed to be with you because you've been chosen, or the man is blessed because he is chosen, or
yeah,
like
I don't know. The prophecy is not clear, and I'm not saying prophecies are always clear, but just tell me the prophecy. Literally, just lay it out for me. Like the prophecy was 4,000 years ago. I can literally come up with a prophecy right now. The prophecy is, a dark lord will rise up in a time of need, and in our greatest moment of need, an unblooded orc will rise up, and with him is his blessed chosen one, or whatever, and they will band together to banish the dark lord. That's all you have to say.
You can, but like, because that's still kind of it. You can even throw in something like, and there'll be a sign, like you'll know them by. You could do like a cryptic physical feature by the one with barren fangs, some
exactly.
shit like that, or the
man with black skin.
Yeah, the human with shrouded skin like shadow. You know, say something kind of cryptic like that. You know, and but they don't.
Or even talking about like his family, like the man who lost hope in his family or something like that. Or it's just like,
yeah, like all that's good. Like it's all surface, like kind of generic, but still they didn't even do that much. They did not.
They never mentioned the prophecy. So I'm always wondering, whenever they talk about prophecy, what is the prophecy? I don't know. No one tells me. Why am I taking crazy pills? Why is everyone talking about something that I have no idea what it is? It's just stupid. It's so stupid. But okay. The prophecy is mentioned now. Yeah?
Yes.
And they take the crazy guy back to the police station, where the crazy guy is interrogated by the feds. And all of a sudden, this crazy guy is not so crazy anymore. He is like completely coherent.
He's pretty standard, pretty normal.
He's like even cracking jokes back at the feds. The feds like show him a badge, and he says, "Oh my God, you guys are the Magic Task Force." Like he understands the gravity of that. This guy's supposed to be crazy. What was he doing? Okay, so here's the problem. This guy was acting crazy, and he was swinging around a sword in the middle of the street, and he was scaring people. That's why he was taken in. And it was just chance that he was taken in by Ward and Jacoby. And
we don't really know why he was doing that.
Exactly. What was he doing there?
Like when he's crazy, okay, yeah, he's a crazy guy with a sword. Okay, yeah, I can buy that.
Sure.
But now he's a coherent man who's part of a part of a secret organization called the Shield of Light, who now is swinging a sword in public
and being crazy. And if this society is so secretive and so hyper intelligent about, like, why are they letting their members just roam free in the middle of the street swinging a sword? What is happening? How did this guy end up here? It just happened to be that a crazy guy ends up actually being a member of a secret organization. And it just so happens that Ward and Jacoby happen to also be blessed by a prophecy, and the only way that this is relayed to us is because the crazy guy actually knows about the prophecy. Like, it's all coincidence. These are like 3 coincidences in a row.
Also, why is he so dirty?
I don't know. No one knows.
And one last thing. I don't understand why he's using a sword either. it's a fantasy thing, like, yeah, swords, definitely. Also, in the promotions for this movie, which I know you didn't have much context for that, but the promotions for this movie, a lot of the posters and a lot of the really short, like 5 to 10 second teasers they did for the movie was a lot of Ward picking up the sword and like holding it in his hand and kind of like looking at it, then looking at someone else that you don't see. So it insinuated a lot that this was going to be like a weird modern fantasy adventure, like that you were going to see shit like that, like, okay, there's going to be fighting with like swords and shields as well as guns and stuff like that. But Ward never really picks up doesn't pick up anything like that.
Well,
ever.
he does pick up the sword and hand it to, I think, Rodriguez.
Yeah, but he doesn't like.
it.
But like, it insinuates like the trailers make it look like, oh, he's gonna use that at some point, and he never does.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like in Star Wars: Rise of Skywalker, where there's this vampire Sith Rey, and I think that's a big part of a lot of the trailers where you see Sith Rey and how she's acting all evil, and the trailer even closes on Sith Rey like opening up the sword and making it into a double lightsaber. And everyone was saying like, oh wow, is she actually going to turn to the dark side? Oh, this is kind of interesting. It was just like a 10-second thing in the movie.
Yeah.
So, I don't even watch trailers anymore, honestly. So, whatever. But yeah, it's a good point, right? It's a little bit of mismarketing. But honestly, that's just kind of a nitpick, I guess. But it's okay. This whole podcast is about nitpicking.
Yeah, yes, it is very much so. Not the whole thing. I would say we've made some pretty solid points in some parts of this. But moving on, venturing forward.
I think also in this scene about the crazy guy, we understand the motivation of the bad guys. They talk about Inferni, which is the renegade elves, and they say, and the feds ask the crazy guy, what does the Inferni want to do? They're asking a crazy guy, what are the intentions of this international terrorist group? And the crazy guy tells them, the crazy guy says they want to raise the Dark Lord. They need 3 wands to do so. They need 3 wands, 3 of them. Okay? So now we have a clear goal. The bad guys need to get 3 wands in order to raise the Dark Lord. And that's it. That's the scene. I don't have anything else to say about it except, why is this guy crazy? This guy wasn't crazy. He clearly has it all straight in his head. He knows who the bad guys are. He knows who the good guys are. He knows what the bad guys want. He knows what the good guys want. Like, I don't get it. Why was he in the streets? What was he doing? Why was Jacoby the one who picked him up?
Maybe he took some bad acid and just like wandered out into the street, and on the way to the feds, it wore off. He's like, oh no.
Oh shit, what did I get myself into?
Oh god. Like, he's like, and even he's asking, he's like, and why am I so dirty? Where did I get a sword?
That would actually be the funniest part of the movie. I didn't really laugh very much in the movie. I know that it had some comedy elements, but like, it wasn't that funny. That would have actually been kind of funny.
Oh god.
I've really fucked up today, man. Oh god, when I get back to the base, they're gonna just fuck. And then imagine if he goes back to the base and everyone's dead. He's oh shit.
Yeah, because they are. He shows like, oh god.
Oh no. I think this is a good transition. Oh no.
To the actual the next portion. After that, they get a call. Whoa, that was a lot. Orcs, Dark Lords, Ancient Prophecies, the LAPD, and you know what? There's still so much more to come. I know, it's hard to believe, but this was a long talk Darren and I had, and we just wanted to keep it all digestible. So if you like what you heard and want to hear more, check out part 2 of our Bright Deep Dive series. It should start right after this, or perhaps there's a pop-up link on screen somewhere by now, if you're catching this on YouTube, of course. But regardless, thank you very much for listening, and me and Darren hope to be back soon for another thrilling episode of Rice and Spice. Take care.